I think that they needed to bring in a third-party negotiator. And I've read a lot of newspaper reports and magazine reports, and I've not seen it written anywhere except by Harvard researcher Alan Stone, who was one of the very few people asked by the government as a follow-up investigator who actually criticized the government. And I just read his report, and he actually said, that situation called for a third-party negotiator, and I completely agree with that. Why? Because inside the compound, their view was the FBI was evil. They came, they shot their dogs. They shot their people. Their friends were dead, bleeding, and such. The FBI would come around with tanks and crush their bicycles, crush their cars, crush his boat. Intimidating, violent. So in order to facilitate a peaceful negotiation, to bring in someone that David Koresh could view as at least neutral, or at least wasn't part of the forces to do harm to him, that would have made a very big difference. They gave one radio. What was the psychology of giving one radio? See, for me, information control is a mind control technique. And when you're trying to help someone who's under mind control, you want to give them information. And so, in my opinion, they should have given 100 radios. Why? Because every single person there was a human being, and every person had the capacity to say, I want to listen too. So why not let them sit in boxes in front of everyone if David Koresh wouldn't let anyone else listen, and let them be thinking, oh, the government wanted us to have these radios, but David's not letting us have these radios, as opposed to, well, we don't know what's going on, only David and only Steve Snyder knows what's going on, and they know what's best. I thought it was an error to torture them, to cut off their electricity, to not allow medical aid. When you're in a mindset that is black and white, that the outside world is evil, and you know you're dealing with someone who has this mindset, the greatest thing you can do is undermine that worldview. And so what was called for was paradoxical interventions. And I was quoted in the Globe on page 1 right after the fire. And I said the FBI mentality is wrong, 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 wrong. They would have done better to call a truce and set up picnic baskets and give them fried chicken. And I meant it. Why? Because the members would then be seeing, hey, they're being nice to us. I would have arranged truces so people could come out in the sun, so they wouldn't be treated like rats, like objects, like criminals. The FBI brought in their hostage negotiation team. This was not a hostage situation. This was a cult mind control situation. I would have brought exit counseling information to people in cults. When I was in the Moonies, I was programmed not to have negative thoughts about the Moonies, as I just indicated. So, likewise, when my father and my mother, who loved me very much, still do, fortunately they're still alive, and they'd say, but Steve, Moon has an M16 gun factory, or, Steve, he's this, multi-millionaire, how could you believe in him? I'd go, crush Satan, crush Satan, crush Satan. My parents didn't understand that a frontal approach wasn't going to work. But the weakness is that when you're involved with a destructive cult is you're not taught to stop negative thoughts about other groups. And so if you're talking to someone in the Moonies, you can talk to them about a different group and how it uses mind control. And they'll think about it. And so you can there were survivors of Jonestown that wanted to go down there and talk with these folks. And they could have talked about Jim Jones, and they could have talked about what was going on in Guyana and what was happening and the phobia indoctrination. They could have talked with them about love and the central message of the Bible, which is love and service and kindness. They could have talked about control of thoughts and feelings. They could have given that information. Time was on the outside world side to help the people inside. But unfortunately, the FBI did things like sleep deprivation, bright lights, loud blaring music of rabbits being slaughtered and Tibetan chants and Nancy Sinatra singing "These Boots Are Made for Walking," and I'm not sure which of those three is the worst. What they were doing was classic brainwashing techniques. The FBI was doing brainwashing, physical, coercive, sleep deprivation, undermining people's faculties, and yet in an information vacuum, all that was doing was making people more dependent on David Koresh and making him more whacked out. So I feel that the FBI provoked further disintegration of the situation there through their methodology. And I mean, there are people who are not cult experts who are looking at that and going, that's stupid. But what was going on in government officials' minds, thinking that this was a good thing to do? And by the way, what about the children? Wasn't this about helping kids? Well, the kids were there. They were getting tortured. They were being kept frozen. They were not being given, they were given some milk. They weren't being given nourishing food and such. What else? So there could have been interventions done with Steve Snyder, I believe. There could have been interventions done directly with David Koresh. David Koresh had a thing about women. I mean, I guess most of you have read the reports about how he abolished all relationships, all sexual relationships between husbands and wives, and he could have sex with all the women in the group and nobody else could and such. I would have recommended women negotiators. I think one of the things the government did right was they allowed Dick DeGuerin, a lawyer hired by Koresh's grandmother, to go in and see him. And I think DeGuerin could have gotten them to come out. I would have gone one step further. I would have sent in lawyers for every single member there. Again, we want to break down the isolation. We want to give people a sense of hope. We want to undermine the phobia indoctrination. So we want people to be thinking they have a future. We want people to be connecting up to their past and to their loved ones and to creative instincts within themselves.